Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to Heads Up Hockey. This is Jersey Joe once again, and it is the off season now. So this is going to be the interesting time of year where we get back to what the Devils can do for the 2023-24 campaign. So without further ado, I mean, this has been a wonderful ride. And I recently wrote an article about the Devils going from second overall in the draft lottery to a 13-game win streak to making the Timo Meyer trade occur and being able to go not just into the playoffs, but making it to the second round. This team has done so much with a revamped coaching staff, and who knows what Tom Fitzgerald has to say coming on the 17th of May. By the time this podcast is up, we should know what Tom Fitzgerald says in the interview with my boy Trey Matthews, a good friend of ours, Christy Flannery, Ryan Nowozinski, James Nichols. So, without further ado, this podcast you can find on Anchor.fm, better known as Spotify for podcasters, Google Podcasts, and many others. And this is also on YouTube. You may be watching it there right now. It is uploaded there via Spreaker. And, anyways, back to the show. The Devils are in a very good position right now with their RFAs and UFAs. And I kind of gotten to the point where the Devils should look at who they have and who they might want to bring back. Um, I did hear rumors about the Devils trading Jesper Brad for Connor Hellebuck, and Hellebuck is really, really solid goaltender. He does have some success in the playoffs, better than Vitek Vanacek's. I don't mean to come down on Vitek in that way, but statistically, yes. And the Devils may upgrade. And who knows if they do a goalie swap, or who knows if they trade Jesper Bratt. I don't know if trading Bratt would be the right move because we've seen what happens when you trade an early pick for a goaltender, and that was Corey Schneider. And that took what, 3 to 4 seasons for that to go south. And I just don't feel comfortable um, wasting a future on a goaltender when the Devils already have a Tyler Brennan, a Nico Dawes, and Akira Schmid um, already here, plus whoever the Devils draft at the goaltender position in this year's draft. I'll get to that into another episode, but I can see this team sticking with what they got for the most part in net. And Mackenzie Blackwood, I just don't feel comfortable with him returning. And I just think the last 2 years and this year, him playing with an injury just didn't boast well. And it just didn't feel good. And at times he was great, and at times he was pedestrianly awful. And at this point in Devils offseason moves, I'd rather stick with the Vanacek and Schmid tandem for now because I find this is Schmid's attempt to be the goalie in the 1A position. And Vanacek could still be the 1B. And who knows if the Devils get Connor Hellebuck. And Winnipeg is going to eventually rebuild and want to build around guys like a Cole Perfetti. And who knows if Kyle Connor gets traded to help expedite the rebuild process there in the True North, strong and free. So, with that being said, I do see the Devils possibly getting a guy like Kevin Ball a 3-year deal. I feel very comfortable with the way he's growing. Not, I don't mean physically, I mean skill wise, mentally. In that aspect, he's already matured very well for this past near semi full season. And the year before, when he started getting called up, he really started showing his grain of salt that he's worth. And to me, he's going to get paid about $825,000. So I played around with Cat Friendly a little bit. And I think his physical play and his defensive play is getting to that pay grade. And he's going to be a very solid player. Next guy is Nathan Bastion. I see him here for another 3 years, uh, $875,000 per season easily. And the way he plays on the bottom six on that fourth line, center, winger, I call him a Sasquatch because he can block shots, he can score timely points when it really matters. So when I came up with Sasquatch Analytics, the hits plus blocks, and then hits plus block points, it's something that I wanted to blend the eye test and the analytics together. So to me, he's one of the top forwards in that metric. And the next guy down there is Jesper Boqvist, the very creative type. And if some reason doesn't pop more than 20 points, I can definitely see him in a trade package because you want to move him for a more veteran playoff guy who can really benefit the Devils. And you want to have some term when you want to move a guy. And that makes it easier, plus an easy contract to eat up when it's prorated in the middle of the season. But he can still work his wonders on the top nine, bottom six. More of a third line guy at worst. And very creative, high speed. I like the way he plays. I just don't know if he'll be there longer than another season. But it's good to give him an extra term for about 2 years. Jesper Bratt, I have this funny feeling that his agent doesn't want a long term deal, and I hope I'm wrong. Get him for 8 years and eat up a majority of that RFA status. But something inside me says bridge deal, and it says 2 years. And Brad's going to go for the rumor was $8 million target. I'm not sure if they do that, but you want to keep the guy here. Eventually, you're going to have to pay him up and pay him for future production too, especially with the 6 points in the playoffs and the 70 something points he had. And that is huge going forward. Michael McLeod, easily 3 years in my book, $1.7 million, big pay raise. Um, that's really good for a bottom six center who wins a lot of faceoffs, physical play, performed phenomenally in the playoffs. Uh, I do want to throw caution out there. I kept Sharangovich over Miles Wood because Miles Wood still takes, timely, completely stupid, unnecessary penalties during the regular season. And yes, he looked very good in the playoffs, but I feel it's kind of time to move on. And I hope I'm wrong once again, but I feel Jaeger Sharangovich is going to pop and he's going to improve upon his skating a little bit more. He's going to improve a little bit more on his shot selection and being more active to the point that he would be a better power play unit guy. And he should work with Devils coach, assistant Sergey Brilin. I think they would work well together. And I need to talk about Timo Meyer. Now, given the fact that he's played in such a prorated amount of time with the Devils after being traded with Zetterlund, Shakir Muhammadulin, then you have Nikita Hotuk, and a couple of picks that the Devils had to part ways with, including the first that is now the 26th overall pick in the 2023 overall selection in the 2023 draft. So where I'm going with is this, that on paper, the qualifying offer on Cap Friendly is $10 million. I can see the Devils giving Timo Meyer 7 years. And what they're going to do is likely they're going to front load it 10 million, then 9.5 million, 9.25, 8.9, 9 million, 10 million, spread it out. And what's going to happen is that Timo's going to be here during the meat of Jack Hughes's and Nico Heischer's years, and that's going to be something that this Devils roster is going to be built around. And then whoever the Devils add during the trade deadline, I know my big dream on defense would be to get a Radko Gudas in free agency, but I doubt he does, and he probably ends up staying with Florida. But who knows what happens with Florida with the playoffs now? That might affect his status as a free agent and what could happen else there. I do have Eric Holla coming back for 3 years, 2.4 million per. Yes, he didn't score a lot in the regular season, but he's a postseason guy. He's a leader of the clubhouse. If you looked at Trey Matthews putting up the Locked On Devils podcast about what he said about Jack Hughes and Jack Hughes said about Eric Holla, the context is there. And when you have those veteran guys around, kind of like a plot, they're there to help keep the younger guys laser focused throughout the regular season and execute during the playoffs. And you want to grow that. And anyways, speaking of growing things during the playoffs, who knows what happens with the Vegas Golden Knights, because the next guy that I wanted from St. Louis that ended up in Vegas ended up being Ivan Barbashev. And Martin Brodeur has ties to St. Louis, but also Ryan McGill, the defense coach, has ties to Vegas. And it is probably very familiar with his game, coming from the opposing coach on the defensive side and saying, this guy is really good here and there, playing a physical game, skill game, really good shot, underrated. I think the way he plays is someone that you don't need to spend a lot of money for. And to me, he could be easily around 3 million, around $4 million. The other guy that I would also really like would be Tyler Bertuzzi. Yeah, he may cost around $5 million, but the thing is, he's an agitator. He can score goals. He can hit as hard as he wants. He can agitate. To me, he's like his uncle, uh, who was a big enemy to the Devils in its heyday. So I think it was Top or Tuesday? I gotta look that up later. But anyways, point being, I like to see the Devils get more playoff experienced players in there. Maybe a Garnet Hathaway or Dmitry Orlov. Maybe not in this off season, the last couple of guys I mentioned, but likely trade deadline. And the Devils are going to be contenders for a while. And they're going to look at these guys and go say, hey, we need to be more physical. We need to Sasquatch more. We need to show the Rangers, Flyers, Blue Jackets, maybe a Eastern Conference opponent in the Atlantic Division, maybe like Tampa Bay, and say, hey, look, we're not, just skilled guys, but we're also physical and we can play our own style of game and hold that team accountable and prevent them from getting easy breakaways. And speaking of which, I have a hard time seeing Graves and Severson returning. And with the rise of Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec, I see Fitzgerald wanted to get those guys up sooner. But the one guy I see returning out of those two veteran players is Ryan Graves, because he probably does turn things around a little bit more defensively and physically, but it's kind of a guessing game to see if he works on a few things. And the Devils do have a lot of guys in the pipeline defensively, from Michael Vukovic, Daniil Missoul, just signed recently, physical guy, mobile defensive guy, and can clear the crease out. You also have the potential of super defensive defenseman in Topias Villain, who might be a few years away. And I can see the Devils definitely, just looking at what they have in preseason and in rookie camp going forward after the NHL draft concludes. So, with that being said, I look at this team right now as easily second best team in the Metropolitan, maybe first in the Metro, and right around top 5, top 10 in the Eastern Conference. So, yeah, I'm just going to be like, actually more like top 5 in the Eastern Conference and maybe top 10 in the NHL standings, because the way they're designed, the way they play, the way they're coached. And who knows if Lindy Ruff is still the coach, or it's Burnett or Deneen or Breland. One of those guys will take care of this team just fine. And that's the name of the game, is to work from the top all the way down and make sure everyone is held accountable and everyone within the team plays for each other as a collective. And when you get to the playoffs, you play as a collective, you win as a collective. So, with that being said, I do see a lot happening now from between now and the second day of the NHL draft, and maybe the first day of the draft. The Devils do make a trade to help improve this roster just a little bit more. Thank you, everybody. This is Jersey Joe of Heads Up Hockey, and don't be afraid to hit that like button, subscribe. 2 more from hitting 80, and another 20 some odd numbers away from 100. Get me to 100, because this helps me, get more notice through the algorithm of YouTube. And if you like this podcast on Spotify and anywhere else like Apple Podcasts, whatever, rate me as high as you can get me up there and get this show noticed. And find me on Pucks and Pitchforks and you will see some new content coming up. And thank you once again. This is Jersey Joe. Peace.